Hello everyone. So today's video will be discussing how to build a dashboard to address some stakeholders' questions in the accommodation industry. And this is based on a real life scenario or something that you would face working at the hotel industry. So we'll be using a lot of different tools, which we'll go through them very quickly. I will not get into the nitty gritty or the details, but we'll just have a view of the tools that were used and how the data analysis was done and how it was visualized and how the dashboard was created. And hopefully, I hope you learned something. I hope you'll leave me a comment, maybe teaching me something as well. I'm always open to that. So, with that, let's head right in. So, what's our goal here? What's our goal today? What do we want to do? Our main objective is to develop a dashboard that visualizes international hotel data. So, this dashboard is designed to feed into stakeholder strategic planning for the accommodation industry. And within that scope, we are focused on finding the answers to three key questions. The first is the accommodation industry revenue, including our hotel or the stakeholders' hotel, growing? And the second one is, should we increase our parking lot size? Are there more cars being parked? And thirdly, what trends can we actually see in the data? So I quickly outlined the project, and this is everything you will need to know on that particular front. Is how to build the database itself, and develop the appropriate SQL query, and then how to connect the Power BI to the database, how to visualize the results, of course, of identified KPIs and any new measures that you introduced, and how to visualize the data into a dashboard. And then, of course, at the end, we'll discuss the findings. So let me quickly switch to the building the database part and take you through how exactly that has been done. So let's take a look together of the raw data. At the raw data, I will leave the link below so you can actually download this and take a look at it yourself if you would like that. And what do we notice first? Okay, so we see here our columns. These are the ones that we'll be working on. We see, of course, if we highlight like that, we see the count of 21,000 or 22,000 entries. Um, we have three sheets for years and then meal cost and market segments that we will have to kind of find out or figure out a way to append to the main database that we'll be working on. So with that, now we have a general idea of how the data looks like. Let's just switch to the SQL querying and see what we can do. So my poison of choice for this particular experience is the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. It's a rather different SQL flavor, but all the more it's really exciting to use it and very, very valuable for a lot of companies because you can actually grab the data from their servers and use that instead of course, of duplicating or, of course, requiring a lot more resources to query. So using the Microsoft SQL Server, the first thing we did is we imported actually the data into this hotel database. So we created the hotel's database and then we imported the different sheets in or the workbook itself in, and it created for us these five tables. The 3 years we discussed, the market segment table and the meal cost table. So what do we do? Let's focus on this particular segment over here. So what we want to do is create a table that's called all years. And what we're going to do in this table is that we're going to bring in everything that we have from our worksheet that's called 2018. And then we'll union it out with the 2019 and 2020 tables. And that deals with the years in themselves. Why I used union all here rather than union is because union sometimes cuts out non-distinct values. But the thing is, it sometimes it deletes also entries that are similar but not duplicates. So we do not want that to happen because we're relatively sure that the data is clean, or for the purposes of this video at least, we will treat them as if they are cleaned. And then the next step would be to join the two tables, the market segment table and the meal costs table. So here we try to append them using the market segment column in our table all years and the market segment column in the market segment table. And then we do the same with the meal costs. All years we take the meal column and meal costs, we take the meal columns and equate them. And on that they append to each other. And that's quite simply how we query the data to be able to move on to Power BI and try to address it. So we imported the data that we have gathered from SQL to Power BI, and we made sure to use the SQL inquiry itself while transferring the data, so we get the information that is joined and the information that is appended, basically, instead of just the original data. So what we did here is we created this dashboard, and the first thing that the stakeholders would be interested in is possibly the revenue. But now you have to make a decision between showing them the grand revenue, which includes the canceled reservations, where actually I do not believe that the hotels got it, the revenue from them, and the actual revenue, which is excludes cancellations. So the key is we did not have these columns. We don't even have a grand revenue column. We had to come up with it by transforming the data and by calculating our own columns to include. So I took the chance, even though it's not one of the requests of the stakeholders. However, sometimes you need to let the data talk for itself. And in this case, I separated the grand revenue calculation into actual revenues and into potential gains from canceled reservations, because as you can see, it's a huge number, which might be the industry norm, but nonetheless, it presents something big. So in my head, further investigation can be brought on to see why these reservations actually got canceled. How can we maintain these reservations and how can we improve that process? But this is something I just toss out there, and fish um, for the stakeholders' opinion on it. Then what we did then is, let's take a look at this graph first, is we take a look at the total grand revenue by date of reservation status and hotel. So the date is basically the date factor in the database for us. And what we see is that the hotels themselves, or the hotels are divided into two types. The first is a city hotel and the second is a resort hotel. There's not much difference in the movements. They are highly correlated, if I may say so, over the period of analysis. But what we can't see indeed is these spikes in city hotel revenues, boom, 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 boom. And while the resort hotels are going in the same direction, they have no such volatility or have no such spikes, which is very interesting, and also we might want to take a look at it. And then we look at this donut of grand revenue by hotel type. I'd say there's a 7% difference between, or basically, you do not have big differences based on the entire sample. You don't have very big mentionable measures where grand revenue favors one or the other. But again, the city hotel does bring in about 75%, which can be slightly attributed to these spikes that happen, these outliers that pull their grand revenue up. And then finally, in this table, we take a look at the hotel type, the total number of nights reserves, and required number of parking spaces. And then we get the percentage, right? We want to see how many parkings or people have residents or guests have required parking per each night they spend there. And then again, we do have a few of these trends to explore for the data for the stakeholders, which include the daily rate, the total number of nights reserved, and the average discount. Of course, we want to leave the explorative part in the hands of the stakeholders. So, what we did is we tried to give them a few keys here. So, they get to decide which country they want to look at, according to the available data, of course. And what particular dates do they want to look at? Like more recent data, or is it before COVID was even a factor? So we can look at like 2018 to 20 to before 20. I mean something in that range here. Do they want to see everything by hotel type? Like, for instance, I just want to see the city hotel, how they factored in. Yeah, seems the trend line is very, very good for them. The total number of nights reserves as well. So this is basically what we want to leave in the hands of the stakeholders to kind of look and determine what they actually want to see. So let's check now. Have we answered the stakeholders' question? So from our dashboard, the stakeholders should be able to see that notwithstanding the impacts of the COVID-19 shock, worldwide accommodation revenues have actually been growing, and especially revenues from city hotels and resorts are generally in tandem, but city hotels, their revenues have more often spiked, showing more opportunities for profit. And generally, seeing the table that we had, there's no particular growth in the percentage of people who need parking spaces. So there's no particular evidence that the hotels need to accommodate more parked vehicles. Subject, of course, to the growth in the subject, of course, of the growth of the people who are willing to spend the nights there. And what other trends do the data reveal? They reveal a moderately increasing ADR and number of nights reserved. So basically, hotels are in business. And as we had discussed earlier, is one point that might need a little bit more investigation is unrealized gains from canceled reservation. They do incentivize further investigation with the new BI applications, with the data analysis, especially now that everything is highly automated, highly electronic. If we can get the data of, for instance, when customers use the app to book, when do they cancel their registration? What insights can, and which step they cancel at? What's the motivation behind that decision? All these things can be further investigated with the needed data. And of course, so we say, yes, revenues are doing well. However, again, we have not really explored the side of costs. So these 3 points really deserve a little bit more attention in order to have a more holistic or comprehensive view of the situation for the hotel industry. I hope you enjoyed this brief journey, and I hope you learned something. And please, if you did find any inputs rather insightful, or if you do have any insightful comments and want to remain engaged, please like, subscribe, and comment